Yeah, we should do this. Okay, so we just recorded the meeting. So something to just to recap, I'm Yang Ming, and I'm talking about the authorization v2 implementation. Last time, Li Ming talked about the new approved authorization policy. This time, this is about the implementation details. The other things is I will talk about the changed things in v2. It's mainly about some internal refactor about how to better support the v2. We will talk about we are going to reuse most of the work we had already done. That is for v1, and we will also talk about some future stuff post v2. So first of all, it's a quick overview of. So first of all, it's an overview of how does Istio authorization policy as well as today's ABM policy work. It starts from your user applying for example, Istio-ABM.YAML. It goes to the Kubernetes API server. Getty will watch the ABM policy in the API server. It will also validate the semantics of the API server. For example, you cannot use an empty string in some of the fields in the policy. Once validated, Getty will push the ABM policy to pilot. In pilot, it does two things. First, it converts the Istio ABM policy to an internal model, that is internal data structure in pilot. Second, on LDS request, it will convert the internal model to the Envoy ABM filter config and distribute it to the corresponding Envoy. That's in control plane. In data plane, when there is a request, it goes through those listener filter chain, and it will eventually go through the ABM filter. And right in the ABM filter, we will do the access control based on its ABM filter config. One thing to note is in Istio, you can use authenticated identities in the ABM policy. For example, you can use the identity from JOT, or you can use identity from TLS. Those are supported by some other filters, like the JOT filter and Authn filter in front of the ABM filter. We will talk more about this later. So the first new thing in the v2 implementation is we will support this zero downtime migration. As you know, the v2 policy is very different from the v1 policy. We imagine it will take some time for our users and customers to migrate to the new policy. Here is a short list about the major difference. In v1 policy, we have 3 CRDs. In v2, we only have 1 CRD. In v1, the delay by default behavior is enabled explicitly by cluster ABM config. In v2, this delay by default behavior is only enabled implicitly on workloads if you have authorization policy on that workload. In v1, you have to use both service role and service role binding to grant permissions to some identities. In v2, you only use authorization to grant permissions to identities. In other words, you combine permission and identities in the single authorization policy. There is another change that might be a little bit hard for user to migrate. That is, in v1, we use service to specify where to enable ABM policy. For example, you specify http bin.default.service.class.local in the service role to specify where to apply that policy. In v2, we switch to use workload selector. It's a label selector on the ports. So there might not be a one-to-one mapping here, especially considering we support prefix and suffix matching in the service field in v1. That will require some user manual migration here. The other thing is the v1 has API version update.istio.io/v1 alpha 1. In v2, we updated the API version to security.istio.io/v1 beta 1. As you can see, the new version we consider it's in beta. It will be more stable than the previous alpha. The following is an example comparing the V1 policy and the V2 policy achieving the same effect. You can take a look. The V2 is definitely shorter here. So the zero downtime migration is about we propose to support both V1 policy and V2 policy at the same time in runtime. That means so first we are planning to deliver the V2 policy in 1.4. So starting in Istio 1.4, you can apply the old V1 RPM policy and the V2 policy at the same time in your cluster. They will both have effects. We will merge them automatically for you. You can so in terms of migration, you can convert your V1 policy to V2, apply the V2 policy, make sure everything is working as expected, and then delete your V1 policy. During this process, we will have the exact same access control on your service or workloads. So you don't need to restart any of your workload. You don't need to worry about there is no gap between there is no gap for any access control missing. There are some caveats here because, for example, it might be hard to make sure that your V2 policy is working as expected, right? Especially considering if you have complicated V1 policy and you have to convert those mapping relationship to this new authorization CRD. So we will also provide a tool that shows the diff between the V1 and the V2 policy in the format of RPM filter config. This will help you to identify any semantic differences between your V1 and V2 policy. In addition to that, we will also add a subcommand in Istio, which is Istio auth upgrade that does its best efforts to upgrade your V1 policy to V2 policy automatically. It can try to look up all those mapping relationship in your service role binding, and then generate the V2 authorization policy automatically for you. But this is only best efforts because there are some fields we cannot do too much. It depends on your actual environment. For example, if you are using prefix or suffix matching in your service in V1 RPM policy. The other new thing here is we will officially start to support ingress and egress in the V2 policy. So we have seen a lot of customers asking this. They want to have some access control on their ingress gateway. We already supported the JOT authentication policy on ingress gateway, which is used by a lot of users. By allowing the access control, like the authorization policy on ingress gateway, we think it will make this more useful. You can combine them on ingress gateway to achieve your access control requirements. For example, one recent use case is to use ingress to apply ingress IP whitelisting, which can be done after this change. So one caveat here is when you are using authorization policy on ingress gateway, currently we do not support authorized based on mutual TLS identities because the authentication policy doesn't support mutual TLS on ingress gateway for now. But you can still use identities from your JOT token. And you can also you can even just use those source IP if you just want to do IP whitelisting.
Sorry, when you are saying authentication policy does not support mutual TLS on ingress gateway, right? But the gateway networking API allows you to do that, right?
Yes, you can use mutual TLS on ingress gateway.
Yeah,
but you can but the authorization policy doesn't work here, so we will not.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, we will. So even if you have authentication policy that is selecting ingress gateway and you have mutual TLS in the peer, it will just be ignored.
Due to some implementation details.
Right.
Okay.
And if you want to enable mutual TLS on ingress gateway, you have to use a gateway.
You have to use
that is different here.
Okay.
But technically, it shouldn't be very hard for us to also support using mutual TLS identities on English gateway. We just need to figure out how to integrate with the gateway CRD or.
Is it just because they get even the TLS configuration being set on the gateway listeners, the authentication filter is not kicked in to pass the metric information to metadata down to authorization.
That's right.
All right, got it.
So that's the two major new things in the V2 implementation. We will also do some major refactor that will change our V1 implementation. So the biggest changes we will refactor use an internal model in pilot. Previously, before we convert the service role binding directly to Envoy RBAM filter config, and there is low any intermediate data structure here, and this is causing a couple of problems here. For example, it makes it hard to support the two policies at the same time. Even we can reuse a lot of code here, it still has to repeat a lot of logic here, which is pretty bad, and it could introduce a lot of inconsistencies here. So after the refactor, we will introduce an internal model in pilot that is an abstract data structure, and we convert the user-facing service role binding to this internal data structure, and then we convert this internal data structure to Envoy filter config. So basically, we divide it into two steps. The new authorization video policy can be just converted to the internal model, and the second part can be shared by both V1 and V2. In such a way, we can make sure we will generate the consistent Envoy filter config, and we could use most of the unit tests that is already in our code base.
Quick question on this. For upgrade, we will have the requirement to convert from the old API to the new API with some tool. Is it still the case?
Yeah.
Well,
and if such tool exists or such a library exists that converts from old library to new library, can we just use it internally? I mean, as a library inside pilot to convert from the old rules to the new spec?
Oh,
so we have a single code base using the new API basically.
So, Costin, are you talking about we converted the V1 API to V2 automatically in our code base?
Oh, I think Costin is asking to make the tool more general, like because the tool provides a functionality to convert from service to workload, which also applies to a lot of other APIs.
Yeah, right? we can make that more general. So previously we have a demo implementation that is only for authorization. But we can make it more general. It basically talks to the Kubernetes API server, look at the label selector in service, and try to generate those things. But we can make that more general. Yeah, of course.
Want to make sure it's prioritized, and also for the internal model, I want to make sure that it's as close as possible to Envoy internal model, so we don't have too many proto translations and this kind of stuff.
Right. Yes, that's exactly what how we are designing this model. If you look at this model in this table, it's very simple. It's almost one-to-one mapping to the Envoy RBAM filter config. It has a list of permission. It has a list of principal. So we intentionally to make it very close to the Envoy RBAM filter config. It makes our conversion much more easier.
Could you document the gaps? I mean, why it cannot be the same and what is different from, because it's a bit difficult to do diff between your model and Envoy model. And maybe you can embed the Envoy proto, so we have to avoid translations. And in pilot, we have a lot of problems with memory allocations and all those things that we create a proto, we create another proto, we copy, and it's using a lot of garbage collection and limiting our scalability. That's why I'm concerned about this.
Okay, we can document this. One thing on my mind I can answer you for now is the Envoy RBAM filter config. It involves a lot of data structure that is specific to Envoy. Here we are trying to use those basic like string and struct those values in Golang to represent this to have it has a similar layout but in terms of the detail type of each field, we tend to use the native one in Istio. It just makes the
yeah, but my point is that is why we have scalability problem, because you have closed structures that are need to be copied, and structs. Anything that can use the cached proto that Envoy is using is going to be far more efficient and scale much better than creating intermediate representations and copying from proto A to proto B to from proto A to struct to proto. That's again important for scalability.
Yeah, so costing, that basically require us to share a lot of proto with Envoy, right?
We do share already.
Many data type defined in Envoy only, and in Istio there is no such.
But there is no way to avoid it, because in the end that's what we generate. So the Envoy proto is what you are generating in the end. So having those structures is a given. If we can put stuff there and cache those objects and pass them around, it's far more efficient from pilot perspectives than as a design.
So yeah, it might be easier and it will improve performance if we use those Envoy data type as is in this model. But first, we can still cache a lot of things even without using that. And second, we tend to make this more generic if in case we want to get rid of the ABAM filter config sometime. So that in that time, we can still use this model to generate some other outputs.
Is this a real situation? I mean, we Envoy API is the one we want to support, and I don't think they have backward compatibility. I mean, I can understand us modifying our own internal APIs, but Envoy API is relatively fixed, and they have backward compatibilities that are pretty strong.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
that's why. Yeah, stronger than pilot model, basically.
So, Costin, you made a good point. Yeah, I think that's a bigger effort. Maybe we can consider it as a long term on our roadmap.
So
because it impacts a lot of other APIs as well, right? Envoy API is basically shared.
Yes, for info, I mean, there is an effort to clean up and refactor pilot itself and to move some of those translations to different layers, and those will benefit a lot by not putting it in model, because the model is the one that is. We have a lot of problems with the current pilot model, which is out of sync. It was created 2 years ago, and it's out of sync with the current APIs. And we are trying to move stuff. One proposal is to move this translation closer to Envoy. Another is to move it in other components. So anyway, we can discuss it offline. It's not just for your info.
So intermediate representation will help if our APIs we have to support. In Istio, if you have to support multiple representation, which is what Yangmin was saying. So if you go from V1 beta or V2 beta to V3 something, then the intermediate representation helps, as far as I understand.
Yeah.
But you can solve that by tooling also, by making sure that the newer objects are always translated to the older ones.
Many times the intermediate representation is just creating bugs and allocations. That's what I'm concerned. Yes. Because there are two impedance mismatches you need to deal with instead of one, and two translations, and two set of tests, and two things that can go wrong.
Well, so actually it simplifies our unit test here. So one of the reasons is it makes us easier to do those unit tests, because we can separate the two translation, and we can separately test those two steps. Well, anyway, I think this involves some implementation detail. We may talk about it in the PR or in offline. So the other changed thing in V2 is, so in V1, we have this permissive mode in ABAM policy. It allows you to test your policy without really enforcing it. So you can know if your policy is working as expected. This is still an experimental feature seen in 1.3, I think. And for now, we will remove the support of the permissive mode in V2 implementation until we have reached agreements on the new API to support it. Because, hey, Costin, are you trying to say something?
Yeah, I was waiting for you to finish. No, just want to make sure to the annotations. It's the first time I see an annotation used in Istio first class API. Typically, we use annotations on the pods themselves to control deployment. And there are various reasons for that.
Okay.
So we need to discuss this. I don't know if the config working group has approved or in general, the rule was to not put annotations in Istio policies, but in Istio APIs, but to put the real APIs there and use annotations in Kubernetes objects that we don't have control over.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, this is not a proposal for using annotation. It's just an example. The goal is it's better for us to decouple this permissive mode field from the policy itself. In V1 policy, it is a single field in the service role, and you have to set it to some permissive to enable that feature. But this thing might be better to put some view out of the policy itself. So because it is not related to what you have in your policy, it's just controls whether or not to have the effect.
Sounds perfect.
We don't support this permissive mode feature.
Great.
Yes.
Yang Min is suggesting to put it in some temporary place.
So the general approach we use for installer and for upgrade is, and for graceful upgrade, and actually for SDS as well, is to annotate the pods or namespaces, and then including the when permissive mode v2 will be implemented, will still be alpha feature and will need to be off by default, and users will need to opt in, because again we don't launch alpha features enabled by default. So normally the process used for all the other features is annotations on support.
Yeah, okay. Right now it's an experimental feature. So we are thinking how to develop a new API to replace it.
And that's a proper way to do it, which is, again, it's experimental, so it cannot be on by default. So user can put an annotation, and just like they do for SDS, for example.
Okay.
Quick question: what's the use case of permissive? Is it for making sure users can slowly migrate into the RBAC posture, or is there something else which I'm missing?
Yeah. So basically, when you add a new authorization policy, you may want to test it out first. Make sure it's working. It's not it won't stop your production traffic. Then after you look at the log to make everything works fine, then you can remove the permissive tag and make it the real policy.
But that will not work actually. I mean, it works
exactly.
It's completely dangerous. I mean, you want to make the smallest change, you cannot set permissive.
That's what I'm not understanding. How does this help? I never understood how RBAC permissive works.
So basically, in RBAC world, when you set some service role to use permissive mode, it will output the matrix about the result of the policy, but do not enforce it.
We understand how it is going to be used, because a user, let's say user has an RBAC policy set, and they want to make a change. They are not going to set permissive mode, because that will block the previous version. So it's not a solution for verifying.
Yeah, this is not a solution. This is an existing thing in V1.
Yeah, so in V1, we have the RBAC config that will, if you set RBAC config, like enable RBAC on a particular namespace, then once you set this config, all the traffic to that namespace will be denied. So we think this may prevent user to adopt RBAC because it may interrupt the existing traffic.
So Yang Min, this is a one-time thing then? So if you don't have any RBAC policies, you can try permissive, but as soon as you have one real RBAC policy without permissive, like Constant is saying, you cannot go back. Is that correct?
And
yeah, you cannot move from the real policy to a permissive policy.
Exactly.
You cannot go back.
And also we have a different mechanism to select this test mode. I mean, you use a authorization policy with a label selector to a canary or to a test job, and then you verify that particular test job is working.
Yeah.
So that's a normal process for config changes. I mean, if you want to make any config change in the RBAC policy, you typically want to do it on a canary first, and then roll it back to production.
Yes, so that's great that in V2 we are not supporting this. I would say, can we even remove it in V1? This is really dangerous for support. Like,
yeah, so that's why we say it's an experimental feature, and we don't plan to remove the API.
Just remove it. I mean,
can we remove it?
Yeah,
please.
Yes,
thank you.
Yes, we can have further design. So currently we will remove it in V2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So next I will talk about something we will reuse from the V1 implementation. The biggest thing is how do we support the authenticated identities. Those things, they are already implemented in the V1 RBAN policy. We had some smaller design docs a long time ago, but I figure we never went through a formal review in the community meeting. So it will be helpful to discuss this when we are implementing, when we are using it in our V2 implementation. So basically, you can use the identities from mutual TLS or from JOT in your authorization policy. For example, this example policy, it uses this sleep service account, and it uses this request auth claims issued by Google. The first one is extracted from the peer certificate. The second one is extracted from the JOT token on the request. How do we support is we will insert two different filters in front of RBAN filter in runtime. The JOT filter will validate the JOT token and write the claims to the dynamic metadata in Envoy. The auth filter will validate the peer certificate. More specifically, it's not doing the X509 validate. It only checks if there is any peer principal in the certificate. This is a very lightweight check. The real certificate check validation is done by Envoy itself. And the auth filter will extract the principal to dynamic data, and it will generate those attributes in dynamic data based on the authentication policy configuration. In authentication policy, you can configure to use peer or use origin. If you set it to use peer, it will generate the attributes based on the mutual TLS. If you set the authentication policy to use origin, it will generate the attribute based on the output of the JOT filter. All those things, they are stored in this dynamic metadata. For example, it has a key and it has a value. An RBAN filter will just read those key and values and compare it against the policy it receives. That's how we support those authenticated entities in Istio and in Envoy. So we introduced a special metadata matcher in Envoy that supports a flexible matching against the key and values in dynamic metadata. It is not exposed directly to end user in Istio, but we use it internally to do all those matchings. So the other thing we will use is the current Envoy RBAN filter. We implemented it for the V1 RBAN policy, and it is pretty flexible. So we don't need to make any changes in the RBAN filter to support the V2 policy. We can just use it as is. So post V2, and this is also something we are currently doing, is we are enhancing the RBAN filter to be more powerful and flexible. The long-term goal is we want to evolve the RBAN filter to be the generic access control filter in Envoy, so that if you want to do local authorization in Envoy, you can use this generic access control filter. If you want to do, for example, external authorization, there is another external authorization filter in Envoy. So basically, you can choose based on what you want. And for this unified access control, the most important change here we are proposing is to add the cell expression support to the Envoy RBAN filter. That allows you to use cell expressions in the Envoy RBAN filter config. If you are not familiar with the cell expression, it is basically expression that supports logical and list and struct and map, and it returns true or false after evaluation.
This is very cool, Yangmin. Two questions. What's the line between using cell expressions and moving to a WASM-based code which you can ship for enforcing these policies? And
so
And let me just ask the second one
please.
also so you can answer. And second question is, when you get away from the mixer rule evaluation, do you have the environment level attributes to enforce the right RBAC policies?
Okay, so for your first question, the cell expression currently is only added in the RBAC Envoy filter. We are still considering how to support it in the user-facing Istio API. If we later decided to support the cell expression, it will just be a user-facing API. Under the line, the fastest way and maybe the easiest way to support to implement it is to integrate with the cell evaluator in Envoy, which is what we are doing for now. In the long term, it's possible we translate the cell expression directly to some WASM code, which is much different way, and it requires more investigations. So I think it's different ways to implement the cell expressions in the implementation layer, like the cell evaluator and the WASM. They are both options we can choose.
Sorry to jump in on this one. In the interest of cross-working group communication, there are efforts, for example, by the gRPC team in Google and from other teams to have native support for Istio, where their raw gRPC clients will communicate directly with Pilot and will enforce Pilot API configuration. And obviously, none of them will support WASM. So I think it should be a clear requirement that no core feature, no Istio API should require WASM. If it's used for optional things and kind of fancy features, that's probably okay. But the core Istio API should be implementable with or expressed as an Envoy API so that other implementations can also support it.
That makes sense. The only thing will be when cell gets too complicated, I guess. But
we need to consider if we want to support this case, because again, Istio is not only about Envoy, it's also an ecosystem of other components that consume Istio APIs and operate under Istio API control. And if gRPC cannot support it, then again, this entire model is broken.
Will gRPC support cell?
They are working, no, I don't know if they support cell, but they are working to support XDS. That's the first step. And they have a lot of problems because, again, we generate a lot of config through some custom filters and through some kind of complicated or non-Envoy standard, because they also want to support any XDS server, not only Istio.
So
Niraj, when you say cell is too complicated, so the plan is currently we are going with the authorization v2, right? Cell will just be one of the conditions. It's optional for user. If they think that the current authorization policy cannot express the semantics they want to express, they can use cell, because cell provides more advanced feature like recursive NNR and other things.
Totally.
Yeah.
I understand, Limin. The only concern for me always with these new languages, it is more or less DSL, which I don't know if it is Turing complete or not, is how do you validate beforehand that it is going to work? Or how do you validate that you're not going to hose your Envoy data plane because I have some experience doing this in other proxies by injecting programming and
creating POS. Yeah, we all did that at one point.
So that's my concern. And from a support point of view, it becomes really complicated if we can't evaluate upfront that this policy, this expression is secure.
So cell expression, it is secure, right? Because it doesn't.
So cell at this point is completely complementary. If we.
Robin, are you?
Okay.
Okay, so I think this is secure. You have guarantees that if you terminate, for instance, you cannot have loops or anything like that. The real problem we have cell here is that you have to evaluate rules in order, right? If you have a bunch of rules like that,
yes,
you know where the rule matches, you have to evaluate them. So you have a linear cost problem now.
But it's not the security of cell itself that is in question, is the security of the rules that I wrote.
So that's what I meant. Yes.
Yeah.
So right now, the biggest hurdle for us to adopt SAIL is on the performance side, actually. So SAIL currently is not like the performance is not comparable with the current native Envoy filter. So we just consider this as complementary. If the current authorization policy cannot satisfy users' requirements and they do have some needs to use expression, then we can provide this option. And in the meanwhile, of course, there are efforts to optimize the SAIL performance.
Why not go there when there is a need emergent from users rather than provide it first?
No, we are not providing it now. Currently, the control plane API does not have SAIL.
Then why are we discussing it?
I think Yang-Min is just talking about the future plan.
So the other thing is we know the SAIL is very powerful and it could be a very complicated expression. It's likely we will not support the full semantic of SAIL. We may just support a subset of it that is most useful and control the complexity and balance the usability.
Yeah. Even if we support SAIL in control plane, so we will only support a subset of it, like only the simple and then all.
That's even worse. That's even worse because the biggest problem we have with Istio across everything is complexity and too many features that user cannot test, cannot understand. Okay. And it's a valid concept, valid requirement to have, to minimize the feature set to something that we support very well, and we have support for testing it to roll out in production and not extend it because we already have too much complexity in the product.
This is not an entirely new feature, right? If some user is already using the mixer check rule, they should be already familiar with this SAIL expression. If we have this similar support in authorization, it will definitely help them to migrate to use authorization policy.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Costa.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say there's a difference, though. If you have a central policy enforcement engine, you can kind of think about different scalability and performance requirements there compared to when you're enforcing it in your data plane, where your data plane can be completely hosted by an invalid expression. You understand what I'm saying?
Could you clarify a little bit?
So when you are using mixer-based policy enforcement, you are shipping your policy matching and evaluation to a different entity.
Right.
That entity can ideally have a different scaling and performance requirements compared to when you do that in your data plane, which is what's being proposed now, right?
But the most complaining about that model is it requires additional network request, and this introduces too much latency and reliability issue.
But I think the proposal here is to not support SAIL until we have a clear need and to go with simpler and better first.
I agree.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree too.
Yeah, this is not proposing just about SAIL. We are just seeing this is all in the Envoy in data plane. We are not proposing to add anything in control plane at this stage.
Keep in mind we have the escape patch, which is a filter config and patching and other stuff. So let's not confuse people and just remove it and not waste time discussing it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So the other remaining thing is about testing and documentation. We will add new engine tests to cover the V2 flow as well as the migration scenery. For documentation, all those existing pages, they are needed to be updated. And we will also add new pages for how to upgrade your V1 policy to V2 policy. So that's all about this design. Please feel free to comment if you have any feedback or concerns. Thank you very much. Let me know if you have, you can just ask if you have any questions now. And I think we have another, we have some other topics.
Yeah, there are 2 other topics in the agenda. Thanks, Yang-Min.
Sure, thanks.
Shall we move to the next topic?
Hey, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Jordan. I work for Dual Security, now part of Cisco, and my coworker Jeremy is on the call as well. So I'll be the first to say that I am not as in-depth with Istio internals as all of you, so I appreciate your patience kind of as I walk through our use case, what we're going for, and really what we're looking for is to try to figure out the best way that we can contribute towards making this idea happen. And then the idea is really simple. It's that right now Istio supports JOTs via either a header or a URL parameter, I believe, and our goal is to add cookie support as well. I saw that there was an existing issue where someone had mentioned kind of a similar goal, and there was a proposed workaround right now to create an Envoy filter that could kind of do this translation for you, moving what was in a cookie into a header so that Istio could process it. But we would love to contribute work towards adding support via cookies as well. I was digging through the code base. I have a general game plan for how I think it would work, building on what's already there. I did see someone just now comment on the GitHub issue that there's an open effort towards getting OpenID.
Yeah, I added a comment. Yeah, so I said it's related, but it's not exactly what we are doing.
Right. So ours is just very general, like supporting JOTs in a cookie the same way that they're supported as a header and a URL parameter now. And so to that end, if we think that, obviously we think this is very useful for single sign-on kind of cases, but if that would be something that y'all would be in support of, we are very happy to take on the effort to make that happen.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. Yeah.
Just not really knowing the best kind of next steps for us. Like this is kind of us trying to figure out the best way to engage. Like if we need a formal design document, what ways we can do to make sure we're all kind of on the same page.
Yeah. Thanks, Jordan, for offering to help on this, providing this feature. I think it will be a very useful feature. As you can see, a lot of people comment on this issue. I think maybe the next step is, can you put on some design doc? Like it doesn't have to be very long. It's just basically express how you're going to do it and let people review it.
That sounds great.
And, we know what your plan is. Yeah, then you can start contributing code.
That sounds like a plan. I'll take what we have internally, which kind of describes, here's where I think the code would go. Here's the changes that I think we would make, and I'll copy that into the Istio drive and elicit comments from that. Would the best way to communicate out to this working group be through, I assume there was a mailing list, right, that I could just post a note saying this document is live, it lives here, would love some feedback, or would it just be coming to the next session here?
Yeah, you can send out this design doc first to the mailing list, and then it's better to review the doc in this working group.
Okay, that sounds great. That sounds like a plan. We'll make that happen.
Okay,
something to just give you some quick update when you are writing your design doc. So the first thing is, I'm not sure if you already noticed, we are switching to use the Envoy JOT filter in Istio in 1.3. So previously we have our own Istio JOT filter in proxy. Later we upstreamed that JOT filter to Envoy with a lot of changes, of course. And we haven't switched to use the Envoy JOT filter for a long time. In 1.3, we finally finished this thing. So if you are aiming something changes in post 1.3, you should take a look at the Envoy JOT filter, not the Istio JOT filter, because the Istio JOT filter will keep it for backward compatibility for some time, but it will be removed later eventually. That's the first thing. The second thing is, because this is going to be some change in the Envoy JOT filter, so you probably also want to file an issue in the Envoy GitHub just to let them know what you are going to change there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's basically the two things.
Is whenever you say using the Envoy filter, one thing that was a bit confusing just jumping into the code base at first was that it appears that the Istio proxy was kind of a fork plus of Envoy. And so to that end, do you anticipate a lot of the code that we're writing going upstream to Envoy itself, or would this be to the Istio proxy?
I imagine most of your code will go to the Envoy, not to the Istio proxy.
Okay, great. That helps a lot. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think once we remove requirement of using Mixer, I feel like Istio proxy is more or less redundant at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, long term, if we can get rid of proxy, it will be better. But there are some remaining work, like the authentication filter is still in proxy. So we need to think about how to move that.
Yeah. So Jordan, Oh, sorry. Yeah, so Jordan, I don't know what your plan is. So the related issue I mentioned in the issue itself is there is a OIDC effort. I think there was also a presentation on this work group before. So basically, the plan is to add a token acquisition. Yeah. So add a token acquisition feature. So basically, if the request comes in and there is no JOS token attached, the service will, the auth service will start an OIDC flow and acquire the token. And along with that, there will be a session manager. There is another session manager which will encrypt the token before it's sent out to the browser. And when the browser sends back the cookie, the token, which is in the cookie, it will decrypt the token and then forward to the JOT filter to do authentication. So that's, yeah, so this is the design doc, I believe.
Yeah. It definitely seems like there's a lot of parallels with what we're going for. While our use case is what I would consider probably simpler, and just in terms of building what's already there, just looking kind of in a different place, I'd really be interested to also be involved with this effort in some capacity. Do you know who the best people would be in the best?
Yeah, I don't know if, so this doc was written by Nick Smith and Peter Chen and other folks from Cloud Foundry. So basically I am in touch with them to, so I am aware of this effort, but mostly it's driven by Nick Smith and Peter Chen from Cloud Foundry. I don't know if he's online. He sometimes is also in the working group discussion.
It does sound like
there is some change to this architecture later because we want to also, so the main change is we want to move this all this auth stuff to a separate auth service and use external auth filter to communicate with that auth service, and all the logic will be inside auth service itself. So with this proposal, everything is inside Envoy.
I see. Okay, it does sound like in general it would be good to just be in contact with them, because it sounds like we're working in a similar kind of user authentication space. So I'd love to reach out to them. I'll see if I can figure out some contact information either from the doc or I'll reach out through some other means. But we'd love to get involved in that.
I can also connect you with these people.
That would be great. I would really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Lemon, a quick question for the OIDC workflow. Is it similar to using something like an OAuth 2 proxy in front of Envoy, for example, which can handle all the OIDC workflow and then only the authenticated requests eventually go to your ingress?
Yeah, I don't know what's the OAuth proxy you're talking about. Basically, what it does is it is starting a OAuth flow.
Yes.
It's going to send the authorization code to the get authorization code from the authorization server. You can deploy authorization server and doing all the redirect. It's the standard OAuth flow.
When first looking at this document, it did seem very similar to what you described, which is kind of taking care of that use case, that common use case of people putting an OAuth 2 proxy in front of Istio to handle that initial authentication and then passing back authenticated requests. So that's what it seems like to me this effort is. And I think
exactly. That's what we do actually also in our production system, by the way.
Oh, okay.
So is there anything more to discuss about this one? We have one more topic.
Yeah, I will follow up with Jordan to basically connect you with the Cloud Foundry folks.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure.
So we have one more topic.
And I added that one. My name is Miriam John, and I work at IBM. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this one, I think Lynn added this one because we had some users who, when they had MTLS enabled and forgot to add container ports to their deployment, the pod spec, where the services were not working as they expected. And the way they had that one working was, of course, to obviously specifically write the container ports in there. But then this one is to see if we could actually enable those annotations. So that one specific annotation that I've mentioned over there, which is the include inbound ports. And it looks like in the 1.2 release note, it was mentioned that this would be, there are plans in the future to enable this one by default. So I just added this one in there to see whether there was any objection to doing this one, this work as to enabling this annotation by default for the upcoming release.
Is this?
Well, so the question is this under the security? Is that what I thought?
Yeah. I feel this is more about the networking. So, is there any concern from the security you want to resolve?
I haven't looked at the issues. Anybody familiar with that?
With respect to enabling annotations in general, does the community generally require a design document of that sort to when we have plans for enabling an annotation by default?
Sorry for I didn't pay too much attention. I was a bit offline. I think in networking we so what are you trying to achieve here?
What's that?
What is the goal? What are you trying to?
Well, we want to enable this annotation by default.
In for everyone who download Istio, or for a particular installation of Istio?
For everyone, I guess. Yes.
That's a bit more complicated because there are all kind of backward compatibility and upgrade concerns, and we are working on doing something like that for 1.3 and 1.4. So there is a feature to enable all ports by default by using a wildcard filter and all kind of other changes. But it's a pretty risky change right now, and because we had some security problems with this approach when we included all ports.
This is a security escape from my point of view, at least. If you do it by default.
Yes, the problem is that the reason we have what we have is we had some security bugs with using the sidecars as a way to, there are some security bugs that were reported, and we had to fix it this way. And we are trying to have all ports intercepted by default, but there are all kind of testing and security concerns. I mean, RBAC rules need to apply and need to make sure that everything applies. It's not as simple as it sounds.
Right.
And we are working for 1.3 or 1.4 to have this as an alpha feature.
Okay. You mean enabled by default, right?
Enable all inbound ports by default, yes.
You're right. Okay. And when you mentioned that for a specific installation, what does that mean?
So right now it is, if you modify the inject template, is the user modifies the inject temp or you modify the installer, you can pretty much add anything you want.
Right.
So and it's not difficult to add an option at top level. Well, it's not difficult for a user to create an installer, to modify the installer to do that. API wise, it's a bit more complicated because we need to we are starting to review all install options as proper APIs, and there is a lot of discussion about what should be exposed and what should not be. But as an experimental feature, is not a problem.
We can give it an experimental profile if we want in 1.3.
Yes, in general, it's not a problem. Yes.
Right. And so Kostan, could you actually mention that? Do we have any features or anything like that open right now for that specific work?
I'm pretty sure there was. It is on the roadmap and the TOC discussion, because that was one of the big features that the TOC approved for, as P0s for 1.3. I need to look up the link and the meetings where it was discussed, but
sounds good. If ever you find out one, I mean, if you could put a link over here with this one so that
Yes.
we can take a look. That would be great. Thank you so much.
And it would be wonderful if you can help test this feature, because that's what we are blocked right now. I mean, there is a proposal to enable this in 1.3 because the implementation is code complete, but
right.
we are having, I mean, it's a difficult feature to test properly and to review because
right.
there are security implications that we need to be very careful with.
Absolutely. I would love to help. So yeah, just let me know.
I'll do that.
Yeah, thank you. So that's all that I have. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks everyone.
Yeah, on time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.